Carson Show.
I love my Fridays. Got to get to talk to somebody who has forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. He's the great Michael Shure, everyone. Hi, Michael.
I don't know that I want to be
You're going to unmute yourself or something. Why can I not hear Michael?
I don't know. I'm not muted.
Michael, you've got to unmute.
I'm not muted.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're not muted. Okay, good. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Then I blame you. Who do I blame? Albert. I blame you.
Albert, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Michael,
I don't want to be part of a show, Mark, where concur is a ding word. It's not a ding word.
It's what I think concur is a ding word.
It's a smaller show than that. I mean, concur is. I agree. Concur.
No, but you just said the reason I say ding word is because you could just say I agree, but instead concur is used, which is who uses concur in regular sentences.
I think
conversation.
We'll have this conversation at another time.
Thank you.
I think it was an unfair ding to Kim. That's all.
All right. Well, I stand by the ding. I think it was a sound one.
Yeah,
now,
I thought Michael Shure was on my side, and now he wants to take away my ding.
I know. Well, I mean, that's the great thing about Michael. He calls him as he sees him.
But I don't think a ding is
it is a good thing, Michael. You don't get it. You don't get it. You just don't.
You just don't get it, do you? You don't.
You don't. You don't, Michael. Right. You get it. It's weird because a guy who gets so much that we don't get doesn't get the ding, which he should. It should be a layup for you to get it.
It's weird. I concur.
Now, let me ask you about what's going on first in the world of Trump and his cronies, his lackeys, his enablers, specifically Steve Bannon. It was the news of the day that Steve Bannon has lost his appeal. This is on, essentially all these guys, Bannon and Navarro, they all flipped the bird to Congress when they were served with subpoenas.
Yeah.
Now they are, Navarro's actually serving time. Bannon, I think, has a couple of other appeals still to come if the appellate court will hear it. How does this affect the sort of the body politic of their world? I'm not talking about the votes of the electorate.
I don't think it affects their world very much. I think that the people in their world think that they did the right thing, and they're not going to sort of react well and say the Court of Appeals held it up. I guess this is not really a good man, and I guess he should have testified to Congress. They will still think it's an unjust, prosecution, an unjust conviction, and an unjust look at it by the Court of Appeals. So I don't think it changes any meters. But what it does do is it means that Steve Bannon's going to go to jail. He's been out on appeal, and he has a 4-month sentence, and I'd expect that they're going to make him start serving that pretty quickly.
I also remember Steve Bannon having that scam in which he suggested if you want to build the wall, send your money to us. He made an infomercial. They did a live show, and 100% of the money will go to building the wall. Of course, 100% of the money went to Steve Bannon and the other guy. None of the money went to building a wall, and he was convicted, but then pardoned by Trump for that. So you always wonder if there's some kind of way the system can be gamed on the part of Steve Bannon to slither away.
Well, I mean, that's the only way he would get away is by slithering. I think there's no question now that they seem to be out of legal options. And I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's the end of the road, and they're going to have to sell a lot more pieces of the wall in order to keep this legal process going. I think that's another concern for Bannon as well. I think that they're going to probably make him serve it, and perhaps he'll be able to get out on time, with some time served, get out a little bit early from his 4-month sentence. That I don't know, but I don't think, these are interesting stories, but they're sidebar stories, especially when you have a president on trial and it's the middle of an election year, and then you have so many other things happening politically, and the Republican Party trying to figure out how to deal with MAGA or not MAGA, both in Senate and House primaries, and even in Congress, where you had someone try and vacate the speaker. and she was, she's a big part of MAGA world, Congresswoman Green. But they took her to task, and she was a
I
big.
mean, she really was. She was dragged down. I mean, that she
Oh
never
yeah,
really caught oxygen on that, did she?
no, she didn't at all. She didn't at all. There was no, you don't take something to the floor if you think you're going to get drubbed in such a way by your own colleagues as well. And I think that's what they saw happen. And then the aftermath is all these Republicans, emboldened by the fact that it was such a big defeat for Green, that they went out and started just saying worse things about her. I mean, it was just not a good day for her. And I would imagine that once either Trump wins or loses next time, that Green is going to be a target of some sort of real old school Republican in Georgia.
Well, she's definitely feeling as though she's coming close to her expiration date. I do want to ask about these other Republicans you talk about, because this is quite significant. This isn't related to the Trump court case, and this is really about a bizarre and shameless sort of media tour that these various high-profile GOP politicians are on. I mean, the Tim Scotts of the world, perfect example. J.D. Vance would be another example. Refusing to accept the election results for 2024, or refusing to state that we'll accept the election results. I mean, they're stonewalling it. They're essentially saying, I mean, the implication, if we win, we'll accept it, and if we don't, yeah.
And that's something I've asked of Trump supporters out in the field, and I get similar answers. Of course, it's a sampling that's larger than two people. So some people will say, yeah, we'll accept it and we'll move on, as long as it was legitimate and not like 2020. So there's still this kicking and screaming over 2020. They were fine with 2016, but 2020 was where the issues were. And the other part of it is, Tim Scott, a sitting U.S. senator who ran for president, looking back and saying that he can't say that 2020 was a legitimate election. This is also the audition period. So it's not really a typical time in politics. And it happens just, 6 months before any election, before a running mate is picked, and before it's clear what the policies and the cabinet would look like for, someone running for president, where people are trying to kiss up to Donald Trump. And perhaps Tim Scott and J.D. Vance are doing the same thing. I mean, J.D. Vance came around to being a Republican, won a seat in Ohio for the Senate against a popular member of Congress. So I think that there are ways to look at this and say that these people are just doing this as part of that sort of mating call to be on the ticket or to be in the cabinet. But I don't know that that's accurate. And, I also don't know that it's good for the party. And some Republicans think that they just need to stop talking in that way.
In that spirit, I'm just wondering, with the Tim Scott's and J.D. Vance's of the world, as you say, and you correctly suggest, it's the audition period. They also aren't willing to commit to the idea that you would pardon many of those Capitol rioters, which is something that Donald Trump has been unapologetic about.
Yeah, I think that goes to sort of feeling it out if they're not selected, and if they have to remain there and they're in the Senate and they have to see these Capitol police officers. And these people play chess and they think 3 or 4 moves ahead. But not all of them, and not with every utterance they make, but they're very, very careful people. And there are reasons why that is something that they're not going to embrace. That doesn't impress Donald Trump necessarily. They don't need his support either to pardon anybody. It's not like it has to clear a Senate committee or a vote on the floor of the Senate. So senators are free to do that, even if they're trying to kiss up to Donald Trump. On policy and on the election especially, which is something that is very near and dear to Trump, they're gonna walk that line if they want to be part of a future potential Trump administration.
That administration, that future Trump administration, seems to be informed by those things that Trump is, again, unapologetic about. The most recent is the deal he wants to make with fossil fuel companies. Give me the $1 billion and I'll take care of you. I'll roll back all the environmental regulations that have been put into effect by Joe Biden. You can not worry about all the leases that you want for drilling, for fracking, and for extraction. I wonder if you can speak to that politically. Does that move the meter in this country? Do people see the sort of I mean, I'll just say it's kind of this. I understand that all politicians have to take care of their constituency, Michael, but I mean, here it just seems extraordinary.
I think here's what I think. I don't know that a voter hears that and says, "Oh, I don't care about that," or if it moves a voter. But he gives Donald Trump on the stump the ability to say that he somehow can control the price of gas, which he can't. But because he is working hand in hand with these gas companies, petroleum companies, he's able to articulate that in small and big audiences to say, look, the gas prices are too high. I've already told the fossil fuel industry I will work with them. And if they are free to drill in other places and a lot of these environmental restrictions are rolled back, then, okay, they'll be able to lower gas prices. It doesn't work like that. He knows it doesn't, but Americans don't, by and large, know that the president has very little to do with gas prices. If gas prices were to go down $2 tomorrow, it will not be because Joe Biden lowered the gas prices or did very many things to impact that. Conversely, if it went up $2, it would be blamed on the president, but that's not where you pin blame. This is also saying the quiet part out loud. Presidents for a very long time, in whatever industry they're in, have said, look, elect me and we'll work with you guys, right? And we'll figure this out. They don't do it with such a blatant quid pro quo that Trump has done recently. But I think that the reason he's done it in such a loud way is to get voters to understand that he's on their side when it comes to the price of gas.
It's also remarkable, as I think back on the Trump administration, how they dry clean government websites of any reference to climate change. There is an aggressive, and you'll remember they subsidized coal mining operations. They penalized solar companies. I mean, it was quite extraordinary. The thumb they put on the scale of energy consumption here in this country.
Right, but that's I'm not as I don't know. None of that surprises me. That's sort of the back and forth. Who do Republicans appeal to right now? Energy, right? Insurance, other places. So the petroleum industry, the coal industry, West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, or parts of Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania. These are really areas in the country that are pretty red, and these are still popular things in those areas, in those districts. So it's not surprising then that a Republican presidential candidate would try and do favors for those industries, as the Republican Party has done. I mean, you look at the Texas delegation in Congress. I don't know. I mean, I can think of just a couple of Democrats in Texas right now, and you look at California. I can think of just a couple of Republicans. So you see sort of how the politics play locally and how that translates nationally. And the party, for better or worse, the Republican Party is aligned now with that sector, and it's helped them out, for better for them.
It's so crazy, though, because, and again, this will never bubble up to the surface, but the reality is, and this is very much like Obama. Obama had sort of an all-you-can-eat policy toward energy. It was clean energy, it was dirty energy, it was fossil fueled, it was solar, et cetera. Yeah. And Biden has a similar dance going on, even though he has this label as an environmental president, and I am okay with that because he is making strides in ways that we've not seen before. Right. But we've never produced as much fuel as old school fossil fuel energy as we have in this country right now under Joe Biden.
No, that's true. And that's 100% true. And that's something that is not talked about. It is not, people are always surprised when they hear it, but it's absolutely true. There's more fuel coming out of the ground in the United States than ever at any time in our history. So, and that's on the president to get people to know that. That's on his campaign to let people know that. Whether or not that will impact them, they'll say, well, the prices are still high. He closed the pipelines. If he opened the pipelines up, the price of gas would go down. And I don't care how much is coming out of the ground. We could have so much more and it could be so much cheaper.
Well, for those who just are, to round out that point, curious at all, refineries in this country do control a supply in a big way, and you can really play fast and loose with maintenance and the opening and closing and the regulation of flow through those refineries. And that is where a lot of manipulation goes on. I want to ask you about the young vote in this country and how much it's really affected by the situation in the Middle East. I understand that the headlines and a lot of very high profile actions are related to Middle East politics. But how much is the young vote really affected by this? It seems to me like not being able to buy a house or, various economic realities when it comes to making ends meet. These are things that might affect young people in a way to have their decision making really go one way or the other, more than the situation in the Middle East.
Yeah, well, you have to sector out what young voters are. Young voters in college are not thinking necessarily about buying a house. Most of them, it's a time of thinking about yourself, about what your future is, where you want to live, what you want to do. Buying a house isn't the first thing. Maybe how I'm going to deal with my student loans, and those young voters could say, well, there's one person who's trying to lower and eradicate student loan debt, and there's one person who is not, and one party that's not. So they could look at it that way. If you look at it though through the prism of what's going on in the world right now, I think that these campus protests mean that there are a lot of people that are irate over the way this is happening right now in the Middle East. And those are young people. Those are angry people. Those might be because they're the ones that will get in the tent. I would say they're likely to be the kind that go to a voting booth too. So you've got this activist set of a very low turnout cohort of Americans that go out and will certainly vote, but they're not the only voters. And one thing to also remember is school's out pretty soon, right? All these colleges are going to be closed. The Middle East may look very different when they come back to school in August and September, and the passions of the activism may have waned by then too. And I'm not saying that they're not just as passionate in September as they are in May, but I do think that what you're going to see the Middle East change to some degree, whether for the better or the worse, and I think that that's going to impact sort of the sustained effort on the part of these students and faculty at these universities around the country, and maybe there'll be a reckoning over the summer about how they're messaging those things. But young voters are not, you just don't want to lose the ones that you have, right? They're not the ones, I say this all the time. If you think you're going to win because of young voters or lose because of young voters, then something's wrong with your campaign, because that's not a program. Do policies that will maybe bring them out, but don't rely on them.
Did the Biden administration chicken out, if you'll pardon the expression, on because mad respect to my chickens, but I feel as though the marijuana reclassification, you made me think of it when you're talking about different policies and different things that might affect the youth vote. The reclassification of marijuana wasn't really the kind of reclassification that affects legalization in a big way, except for those purveyors of legal weed who can now entitled all kinds of tax benefits. And from a business standpoint, it helps them. But did the government kind of they kind of blinked, I feel like. They didn't come all the way on marijuana legalization.
Yeah, right. I don't disagree with you. What I also don't think is that it matters so much as I think that for the people who care about marijuana, not in the legal or illegal ways or the criminalized or decriminalized ways. I'm just thinking marijuana doesn't feel as illegal as it used to. It is pervasive. And I don't think it is, that they're a chain link fence around marijuana that used to be there anymore. And so to that end, I'm not sure how much of a political issue it is, except for those who represent the legal growers and the legal, merchants of marijuana. I don't think it's a big political issue right now. So I think sidestepping it, which is what I agree was done, isn't the end of the world politically or the beginning of the world either.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't mean to hammer away at that youth vote, but I just sort of see it's so interesting to me that the things that do influence or might influence. I mean, here you've got this president and this administration. They're trying to find ways to forgive student debt. They're trying to reclassify marijuana. They're doing certain things that you'd think might resonate with that group of voters. Go ahead.
There's always this sort of heels in the ground crowd, right? I mean, the president is threatening Israel with not giving weapons, yet Muslim Americans are like, too little, too late. Well, that's what they want. They want to use what we give to Israel as a bargaining chip for how Israel is treating the Palestinians. So their people are never all going to be happy. I also want to say that I'm not dismissing the youth vote at all. The youth vote, a very important vote. The Democrats cannot afford to lose any vote from 2020. They cannot afford to not have black voters come out, to not have young voters come out, to not have union members and environmentalists come out. They have to make sure that because I do believe that if they are able to motivate their natural constituencies, that they're going to win the election. If they are not, I think they're going to have a big struggle on their hands in the next election. And I think it's because of the fact that Donald Trump has not really won over many new voters. It's not like there's this sort of swarm of voter support toward him. But Democrats can only win by getting their voters out, which is, an obvious thing to say. It's like, oh, well, it's all about get out the vote. It's all about turnout, right? But if you dig deeper, because of course it's about turnout. You need the numbers, but you have to make sure that those constituencies themselves turn out.
Well, I would say this as well, Michael, and I think this will be seems clear based on some of the things we've talked about already, an election that is going to be contested. They're ready to contest it already, and they haven't even had it yet. And for that reason, you need an even bigger victory, I suspect. I mean, that's what I'd like to see anyway. Whether you need it or not, I don't know.
It's going to be a close election electorally in the Electoral College. And I think in the popular vote, it's really up to the Democrats to make sure that every natural constituent for Democratic politics comes out in November. It's, hard to do that, but the president, this is going to be a summer where people are running for president. And so where we sit now and how we look at it now isn't going to matter as much as how things develop and where that campaign targets. And I
hate to finish with this question, but I will, or the subject, and that is RFK Jr. The latest headline is, I had a worm in my brain.
What?
And it was diagnosed with okay. Give me he won't commit to much when it comes to the other two candidates, Trump and Biden. Give me another 45 seconds to a minute on RFK Jr., please, sir.
We clearly need a worm vaccine in this country. But don't tell him. What RFK? I still believe that he hurts. Look, there, and I'll do this quickly. There are Republicans who could never vote for Joe Biden. There are Republicans who really don't want to vote for Donald Trump. And to be able to say, I didn't vote for the Democrat, but I voted for RFK Jr. because I couldn't bring myself to vote for Trump. That's a safe space to go. So when you look at independent voters in America, right, I don't believe there are a tremendous number of people whose mind isn't made up. I think the hardest people to pin down are the Republicans who don't like Trump. So by giving a little bit of an escape hatch to some of those voters, you are hurting the Republican candidate. As far as how he affects Democrats, it's unclear. That name is very important, especially to Southern Democrats, especially to Black Southern Democrats, who may come out and say, well, what has Joe Biden done for me, as they would say about many presidents? And, well, RFK Jr., I remember his daddy. I remember what he did for our region in noticing it and touring it and trying to tackle poverty. So there's going to be some fall off from Democrats in the South for sure, but that's not where the Democrats need Georgia, and they'd love to have North Carolina, they'd love to have Virginia, but I don't think that this is a Southern election, but that's where it could hurt Democrats.
As we finish up with Michael Shure, Albert, I call upon you with any kind of notions about hockey that you'd like to share with Michael. I saw that they are.
I congratulate Albert because the San Jose Sharks won the draft lottery and they get Macklin Celebrini, which is huge.
Yeah, and Mark, he has ties to the Golden State Warriors organization, so we could tie that into everything else that's going on. Yet we won the #1 pick. Every time I watch the Rangers games, they're playing against the Hurricanes. They seem to score a goal every time. So
yeah, the Rangers look good. I don't think this is their toughest test. If Florida comes out of that next one, it's going to be tough. If Florida doesn't, I now would be a believer in the Rangers to win the Stanley Cup. But we'll see what Edmonton does. They score lots and lots of goals, and they tire out defenses, even though they lost a stunner the other night. But Well, we could talk about this all night.
Yes,
So.
and I wish you would off
I've
the air.
forgotten more than Milwaukee.
Yeah. You can find him across the great World Wide Web. The brilliant Michael Shure. We love speaking with you on Fridays. Thank you so much, Michael.
Hey, guys.
Okay, Michael Shure, everybody. Right on. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.